Welcome to Across Africa, our weekly look at stories from across the continent. I'm Georgia Calvin-Smith, and this week, Ivorian cashew processors face an uphill battle. The country is the world's top grower of the nuts, but its bid to expand into processing faces competition from Asia. Also, Mali is sanctioned, but Senegal loses out. The economic interdependence between the neighbours has left Senegalese traders struggling to cope with the knock-on effects of sanctions imposed on Bamako's ruling junta back in January. And amidst months of sometimes deadly protests against an army takeover, young Sudanese have been finding respite from the instability in Khartoum's vibrant cultural scene. But first, Tanzanians may see some relief from soaring prices at the pump after the government pledged about 41 million euros worth of subsidies. That should kick in from the start of June as the country suffers a deepening cost of living crisis because of the war in Ukraine. Camille Nedlek tells us more.
In response to soaring prices in Tanzania, the government has implemented several measures, including a fuel subsidy. Dodoma also wants to make lemons into lemonade. It plans to cash in on those rising prices by boosting its own oil and gas sector.
We have defined our management strategy for our national petroleum reserves, and the amendments to the law are complete. We will implement oil subsidies in the near future, and we will also begin on building oil export facilities.
One of the projects that could benefit is the construction of an onshore LNG plant in the southeastern town of Lindi, after several false starts over the years. The facility would create thousands of jobs. Another potential cash injection could come from the IMF and the World Bank. Dodoma has requested funds from both. The loans would be used to cap prices on everyday products. This, as many Tanzanians struggle to make ends meet.
So the problem is taxes. And why is Tanzania demanding the government to reduce the tax as soon as possible, as much as they can, so as to rescue the situation, because citizens and the entire Tanzania, we are in struggle. We are struggling the crisis. We are facing crisis, economic crisis.
Even without the oil price spikes linked to the war in Ukraine, Tanzania was already in dire straits. 1 in 10 Tanzanians live below the food poverty line, and a third of children are chronically malnourished.
Senegalese traders have been hit hard by tough economic sanctions that regional bloc ECOWAS imposed on Mali back in January. Within 1 month of the embargo, Senegalese exports to Mali fell by close to 60%. Our correspondents report from the border town of Kédougou.
The highway stretching between Dakar and the Malian capital, Bamako, is quieter than normal. Mali is facing economic sanctions following last year's coup d'etat. The impact has been disastrous for truckers like Mohamed, who now struggle to transport goods between the two countries.
We're tired of this embargo because it makes life difficult for us transporters.
Before we did 2 or 3 journeys to Mali every month. Today we do 1 at most.
Although food is not technically covered by the sanctions, increased border and customs checks have had a knock-on effect on prices in markets like this one in the border town of Kédougou.
Products are becoming more expensive. Meat that cost 3,000 CFA francs costs about 4,000 per kilo now.
The border impacts us a lot. That's why meat has become expensive. A car that we could buy for 400,000 FCFA now costs more than 600,000.
An official at the local Chamber of Commerce told us that the situation is not tenable.
Mali is Senegal's first trading partner in this region. So we're worried about losses in revenue at a local level. But it also might lead to shortages, which would increase prices further.
ECOWAS is calling on Mali to hold elections ideally within a year. Until it does so, it's likely that the sanctions will remain and people will continue to feel the consequences in border towns like this one.
While tired and frustrated by months of deadly protests against an army takeover, many young Sudanese have been finding solace and self-expression in art and music. For many, Khartoum's vibrant cultural scene has become a refuge, helping them forget the social and political turbulence rocking the nation.
Tuning the instruments and setting up the partitions before the choir steps on stage. In between two rounds of protests, these young Sudanese are turning to music to lift their spirits and spread a positive message.
Despite the wounded and the grim reality we face, we are still able to make people happy, to give even a small bit of hope through art.
Over the past 6 months, thousands of Sudanese have taken to the streets weekly to denounce a military coup that derailed the country's democratic transition. Authorities have responded with a violent security crackdown, fueling even more anger and resentment towards the regime. As bodies continue to pile up, with nearly 100 protesters killed since October, many young Sudanese are using art and music to drown their sorrows and fuel their revolutionary flame. This building was once used as a detention center by security forces. It was recently renovated and turned into a school by a collective of artists and activists who painted messages of hope on its walls.
We managed to make the place a tool for resistance. We turned it back into a school. Schools are part of the awareness of the next generations.
On top of the security crackdown, Sudan is also in the midst of an economic crisis. Faced with a bleak future, young Sudanese are increasingly seeking refuge in artistic expression.
Ivory Coast is the world's leading producer of cashew nuts, but hopes to level up and become a big added value player and start processing the nuts for international markets. But that's easier said than done, as the country is facing stiff competition from countries with more established processing industries. France 24's team reports.
It's an extremely delicate job, picking out the most pristine cashew nuts ready to be exported to the rest of the world.
This is Ivory Coast's brown gold. These cashew kernels will be exported. This is what you find in nut mixes, in restaurants, in your homes.
Ivory Coast is the #1 cashew producer in the world, but 80% of its nuts are shelled outside of the country, most commonly in Asia.
These are raw nuts.
It is those raw nuts that this company has been transforming locally, an ambitious project that is also littered with challenges: unskilled labor, expensive machinery, and supply shortages, which makes it difficult to compete with Asian players. For now, the 30 or so factories operating in Ivory Coast are not yet profitable. But for this factory manager, local processing is worth the effort.
The goal is to be able to produce but also transform here so that the added value remains here.
Added value that is far from negligible. When you buy cashew nuts at a supermarket, the farmer gets 4% of the profit, while the factory gets 80%. Companies specializing in export have also been paying attention to the Ivorian cashew industry. This firm, which supplies the American market, has increased its purchases of locally processed nuts.
It's in our best interest for this market to grow, because now people care about quality and where the food comes from. And the Ivory Coast origin is good because transportation times are reduced.
To help companies produce locally, the government has pledged 20% of their total raw material needs at a fixed rate, a limited but welcome measure for cashew industry professionals.
After seeing visitor figures drop from 13 million in 2019 to just 4 million in 2021, Morocco is determined to bounce back from the damage that the pandemic's wrought on its crucial tourism sector. The kingdom's pumped up the PR across 20 countries in a bid to attract future holidaymakers. Take a look.
Life is returning to Marrakesh's famous Jama El Fna Square. Tourists are coming back to the city after 2 years of the COVID-19 pandemic. Morocco was heavily affected by the health crisis, with a 70% drop in tourism throughout the kingdom. Now, prospective visitors are looking for a change of scenery. Welcome news for those in Morocco's hospitality sector.
They're looking to escape from places precisely where there's a lot of people, where there's a lot of pollution. There is a green tourism that's developing. There's a lot of sports, cultural activities.
In a remote part of Marrakesh, at the foot of the Atlas Mountains, visitors are slowly but surely returning.
It's my first vacation after the pandemic. I feel relaxed. I see life with a different perspective.
Morocco has held on to its reputation as a culturally rich destination. Despite the financial difficulties restaurants like this one have faced since the pandemic.
At the beginning, it was really difficult. I'll use the exact words. It was catastrophic. I've never seen this place so empty, so sad. There was nothing, no flights, nothing was happening. But we're very happy now that it's picked up.
Tourism in Morocco represents 7% of its GDP, playing an important role in its economy. It's why the government is encouraging travellers to come to the kingdom with an international advertising campaign broadcast in 20 countries. The next hope for those in the tourism industry: to end the state of health emergency and remove PCR testing for those coming to Morocco.
Well, that's it for Across Africa for now. Thanks for joining us. Do so again if you can. Till then, take care.